Hey, I'm Jay Royster, and today we're at the home of Wray Ward in the Freight District. We're meeting with Mark Miller and Brooks Runkle, and they're going to tell us all about it. So let's check it out.
Here we go.
So here we are at the home of Wray Ward on Thrift Road in the heart of the Freight District. Brooks, Mark, thanks for having us today.
Yeah, man, thanks for bringing us out. It's good to be here.
So before we get into talking about this really impressive adaptive reuse and new construction deal, if you could each give us a little background and bio on yourselves.
I'm Brooks Runkle, and at one of the original partners at Redline Design Group. We were founded in 2002. I kind of lead the corporate upfit studio, but my passion is adaptive reuse. This takes a little bit of the new with the old and fuses it together. So, and Wray Ward was my very first clients and still my best friends. So it was great experience.
Yeah, I'm Mark Miller. I work at Lapp Purser and Associates. I've been there for 15 years now. It was first job right out of college, so I didn't know any better, and I'm still there.
15 years later.
Yeah, 15 years later, just goes by like that. But we, probably since 2011 or 12, we started this department called LPA Urban, where we focus all of our investments in the urban infill areas in the Carolinas mostly. And it's a range of different products, but where we've been most active over the past 3-4 years has been adaptive reuse.
Great. We've got a really impressive project, trophy project here to show off, so I look forward to talking about it. So I read in the Charlotte Agenda, I guess I can still call it that, right? I know they've rebranded. I'm still going to call it the Charlotte Agenda. They wrote an article, it was actually written by Ted himself, posing the question, does Wray Ward have the most impressive, coolest office space in Charlotte? So high praise there. But Mark, you all came out here several years ago, and I was researching, adding up some data points. There's over 1 million square feet of adaptive reuse office and retail here today between what you all have done, Abacus, now the owner of this building, as well as developing adjacent to here, Portman at Savona Mill, Third and Urban, they've got over 250,000 square feet, Browder. So
right.
there's a ton going on in this area, but when you all came out here, that wasn't the case. Right. What gave you the conviction to pioneer and come out here kind of ahead of the curve?
This was 3 years ago. We saw this piece of real estate. It was a bigger piece. It was 3.8 acres, and it had environmental issues. So we had to put it in the Brownsfield program, and that took a year. And so I would tell you firsthand, there wasn't much out here. We didn't know what the direction it was going to go. We saw it was an existing building that looked cool, so we're like, hey, this has adaptive reuse potential. I think Noble's had been announced. I don't know the exact timeline, but I think Noble Smokehouse had been announced. So we're like, okay, there's something.
It's a great amenity.
Yeah, there's something.
Yeah, I'm there once a week.
I am a big barbecue fan, so there's something.
Yeah.
But this was again before Not Just Coffee on J Street. This is before Summit Seltzery. And you know what? The Lucky Dog was here.
Lucky Dog.
Yeah. So we had a couple things that kind of maybe gave us a little bit of hope, a little glimmer. And what happened was the Opportunity Zone came out, and this whole area, while we were under contract, it occurred, and the Opportunity Zone was designated in this area, and so it brought a lot of interest from other developers. And so we started seeing some of the dominoes fall, and again, a lot can happen in a year, and I can't tell you that we saw all this coming. So a little bit, I'd say most of it is luck, and a little bit of it was just, being in the right place, right time.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brooks, when were you brought into the process, and what were your initial thoughts when you saw this building? I'm sure your wheels were turning immediately doing what you do, but what was your initial reaction?
They were. We toured several buildings, several other adaptive reuse buildings in the area with John Christenberry as he took us through here. Mark was gracious enough to take us through. There used to be a really small building appendage to what we're sitting in today that was like 2,500 square feet, 2 floors at 2,500 square feet, riddled with columns, believe it or not. And I said, well, I'm not sure they're going to be able to fit in here, although I loved the character of the old building, which we're going to see later. And I said, well, Mark, this floor level of that old building and that one back there matches up. If we knock off this appendage, we can get the entire 38,000 with a connecting stair all together, which would create this kind of unique environment that no other property we're looking at has, with the fusing of the old with the new. So, I mean, it was just a super cool opportunity.
So Mark, you didn't know Brooks, and working with Redline, you had never worked with him prior to looking at this deal.
Well, yeah, and I think that's important, because when Brooks, and this is what I remember, you know, John Christenberry's with the tenant, with Wray Ward, and they had their architect involved. And what I didn't know at the time, but you know, they have a very strong relationship. As Brooks said, this was their first client. So, you know, these guys are a team and know what they're looking for. And Brooks came up to me, this is how the story goes, as I recall it. He said, hey man, you know, you've got these little buildings here, 2,600 square foot floor plates, a little bit difficult to work with. And like, you know, I wasn't even thinking about that, but he was right. And he said, would you be okay if I kind of sketched a few ideas on this and kind of presented it back to you that might be a better option for Wray Ward? And I said, sure, no problem. And it was like 6 hours later that this design was shown to us. I mean, it was this design to a T, no revisions, no changes. He did it on paper, just did a quick little sketch. It was right, at that moment I was like, wow, this architect, this firm is cool, and I'm in. So whether Wray Ward was gonna take this building or not, when we saw that design from Brooks, took him like a couple hours to do, we were like, we're gonna go in that direction. It totally opened our eyes to, you know, what this property, what this project could be, and we got pretty excited about it.
Right, very impressive. So Brooks, obviously we're in the pandemic now, and I think that this space has been advantageous for Wray Ward during the pandemic. There's plenty of space, which is great, but let's throw the pandemic out the window for a minute. I think everybody's a little tired of talking about it. What were the original goals and objectives from your standpoint when designing this space for Wray Ward?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that they were one of our very, very first clients. And so we had a pretty dynamic space on Baxter, their original location, which was open office, open to structure, very vibrant, enjoyed working with them, but realized as they grew, a lot of their teaming space dissolved or it evaporated. So for this, we really focused on having a high collaborative kind of zones, a lot of different opportunities. They wanted some heads down focus areas. The big thing that we're sitting in here is their town hall, where they wanted to have all staff meetings, but then they could come out and sit here on the benches and work on a laptop scenario. We've got a rooftop terrace that has a great skyline view. So I think the big thing for us was making sure that they had the freedom to roam, get away from their workspace, much like they're doing at home now during the pandemic, is they can move all around. So it's kind of a little bit of cutting edge there.
Mark, what about you from the developer standpoint, your team? What were your main objectives coming into this deal?
To lease the buildings. That was our main objective. But I mean, It's humbling, because we were thinking retail here. We didn't have a ironclad, you know, this is exactly what we're going to do. We just thought these were cool buildings. There were some intangibles that this property had. Again, it had a lot of land. We had a really good park ratio. You know, I mean, we were close to 4 per 1,000 on our park ratio. So that's an intangible that not everybody could offer. So we liked that set us apart. We also had this, we're kind of at the top of the hill, so we had a great skyline view. So there was a couple things that said, hey, this real estate is good. And then again, I think it's so important for Brooks and Redline to be here, because when you called me and you wanted to talk about this building, I said, hey, you can't do this without Redline.
Right, yeah.
Because this was their idea. This was not our idea. Like, we were just kind of in the middle of it all. And so when his rendering came out, and I think we got excited, I think Wray Ward got excited, then everything kind of started falling in place after that.
Yeah, well, it's so cool that you all were able to collaborate in such a way, having never done business together as well. And kind of, you know, some would say you're on opposite sides of the table, and you've created a really impressive project here. So Mark, like all real estate projects, there's shifts and turns along the way. And at what point did this deal really change from a normal development deal or a spec development deal to, okay, this is going to be the home and headquarters for a group that we know that is local, and you're doing a build to suit for them?
Yeah, and it's not any group. It's Wray Ward. This is a marketing agency who has, creativity for days, right? And so when they signed a lease for the whole building, like the whole landscape changed at that point. Like when you're multi-tenanting a building, you don't have the opportunity to go in and do a lot of customization for each space. It's a multi-tenant building, right? You let the tenants come in and do their upfits. But when Wray Ward signed on to the whole building, we then had the opportunity to do things that you just can't do for a multi-tenant building, like this, 60-foot skylight up here. You wouldn't do that for a multi-tenant building, right? So there were several things where they weren't our ideas. It was Wray Ward who said, hey, this is gonna be our home, like you say, for 20 plus years. We want to go take the extra step. And so that's what was really cool about this project, is that it's not just any project. It's the home for Wray Ward, one of Charlotte's largest marketing agencies. They put in a ton of their creativity with Redline, and we started seeing the renderings of the upfit, like the interior, and we started saying, oh my gosh, like this thing's gonna be a lot cooler than we originally thought it was gonna be.
Yeah, it's almost like it's not an owner-occupier,
yeah,
but it's got that feel of a greater level of investment,
yep,
as an owner-occupier would, as opposed to a developer-tenant relationship.
Right, it was a very cool opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd just like to add, Mark mentioned it early on, that it has felt like a team effort the entire time between Lat Purser, but bigger Wray Ward. I mean, Wray Ward, they're being creatives. We fuel off of each other, and we're bouncing ideas off of each other, and then we present them to Mark, and he's like, that's cool. And it's that energy, and there's not the resistance that is typical along a lot of developer lines. And that's what was so refreshing, that it always felt like you were working as a team and friends. And so, we just fed off of that energy.
Well, moving forward, Mark and Brooks, what's LPA and Redline respectively going to focus on?
Yeah, we do intend to do more projects with Redline for sure. We like to have that edge that they provide in a lot of our projects. And the pandemic has definitely had its effect on office. So we've spent the last year, maybe getting a little bit more diverse in the type of products that we focus on. Not that we have taken retail or office off the table, but we've added a new urban flex type product. I think you and I have talked a little bit about that. That it's, again, same urban infill markets, but it's a little bit more on the light industrial side. We're excited about that. And so we've got a few new deals that we've put under contract recently that is going to be exciting to work on in 2021.
That's great. Brooks, what about Redline moving forward?
We're going to continue to work on the creative office front, doing unique branded spaces for each one of our clients. Adaptive reuses. Now that we've been working with Lat Purser, he's been gracious to introduce us to several other developers with Abacus, Big Cypress, and we're continuing to do work right down the street here. And matter of fact, our new office is going to be the neighbor to Wray Ward on Tuckasegee here.
Oh, great.
At the Switchyard. So.
That's great. Well, it's Friday afternoon. What do you guys, we got Summit Seltzery here as a neighbor, great happy hour spot. What do you say we have a drink and enjoy the rest of the day?
Let's do it,
great.
Thanks for joining us today. If you're interested in keeping up with the latest developments in Charlotte, make sure to like and subscribe.